Namaskar. This afternoon, the Rajya Sabha is having an extensive discussion on the state of the Indian economy. And when you look at the faces on the treasury benches, they are blank. They are in denial about the actual state of the economy. If they were to pay attention to what is actually going on in the country around them, the crisis that people are experiencing, the crisis that the government is also experiencing, then they would change that blank, dismissive expression to one of horror at the state to which the Indian economy has been driven by this Modi Sarkar. Today, the RBI Deputy Governor, Mr. M.K. Jain, issued a statement to all the banks saying, please look into your Mudra loan portfolio. The NPAs are worsening. This is the Mudra program, is a flagship program of Modi Sarkar. And as you know, it is constantly touted by the Prime Minister and his colleagues that this is a transformational program, that it is putting money in the hands of people to go out there and create businesses. We have already told the government multiple times that the average of 45,000 rupees is hardly enough for any business person to really scale up or sustain a particular venture under the Mudra scheme. And now the truth is coming out. The RBI has given a warning saying these loans are going bad. So what does that mean? Why would small entrepreneurs not be able to succeed, especially given that their overall overhead and other things will be much lower and limited? It basically is a signal that the larger economy is in deep trouble. I won't go immediately into the macro picture. Let us take the rural economy. What is going on in rural India? We've known of agrarian distress, but of course, we cannot put a pinpointed number on the figure of farmer suicides because this government will hide this data, will delay this data, and ensure that that data will not come out before the Lok Sabha election or the Maharashtra Assembly election, because ultimately, when the farmer suicide data came out, it showed that Maharashtra had the highest number of farmer suicides. Now, when you look at what is the state of rural India, you will see that rural India has been driven to the wall and driven into a hole by Modi Sarkar. Rural India benefited from minimum support price increases during the UPA years. Under Modi Sarkar, minimum support prices have fallen dramatically to the extent that when you compare, you will see that one second, I'll just get the exact numbers. Yeah, under UPA 2, the minimum support price increase was 19.3% over those 5 years. Under NDA 2, it has been 8%. This is not enough at a time when farmers and rural India is in tremendous distress. But does this government understand this? Even the Kisan Samman Yojana provides 6,000 rupees only to landowners. It does not provide it to tenant farmers or to sharecroppers who are even more vulnerable than landowners. Further, when you actually think about rural India, when rural India has a chance of getting a high price, the government, in its quest to take care of its urban consumers, will do whatever possible to suppress the prices of agricultural products. We saw it with onion prices. Just as when they were going up, you saw this government stepping in and banning onion exports. This would have been an opportunity for onion farmers to get a good profit. Instead, with the glut in the domestic economy, they have to suffer further. The same problem arises in a larger sense. Instead of quoting GDP figures, etc. here, Let me just talk to you about the human impact of falling income, falling wages, falling purchasing power. Basically, what we are seeing rural India go through right now is an epidemic of malnutrition. You will see that the rural India figures show that basically there is so much here in this document okay. So what we have seen here, consumption of cereals has fallen by 20%, pulses have fallen by 15%, and other processed food, etc., by 11% between 2011 and 2017. So what is going on basically is that they do not have the income, the purchasing power. They are cutting down on food purchases. Now, if you go to an economics professor, he will tell you, or she will tell you, that food expenses are inelastic. That is the last thing that will be changed if people have lowered income. They will still have to spend on survival. Even that is being heard today by Modi Sarkar. And if we want to find out the details of this kind of consumption slowdown, which demonstrates that rural poverty is worsening. Contrast again with the UPA years. 10 years, 140 million people lifted out of poverty. During NDA, more and more people falling into poverty because of lack of wage increases, lack of purchasing power, and this is demonstrably hurting in the form of increased malnutrition. What does Modi Sarkar do when you ask for this data? When this data is leaked out by intrepid reporters from Business Standard, basically they go out there and say, there are data quality issues. We will do this survey once again after 5 years. We are going to raise in Parliament this whole issue of how do you spend 100 crores and then not have proper data? Who are the officials who are responsible for this? Can we have an inquiry into what has happened? Why can't this government do something as simple as collect data? No other government has had a problem in collecting data and sharing that information. Any bad news is immediately buried, declared as a non-official report, or regarded as essentially some kind of a conspiracy by someone or the other. And that is something that we are urging the government to go beyond. Unless this government understands what the problem is, it will continue to be burying its head in the sand in denial, and the people of India will suffer. The people of India are already suffering. If you look at the value of the rupee, it is starting to fall even further. This was an issue of big importance to the candidate Modi in the run-up to 2014. He used to mock when the rupee's value was falling and liken it to the Prime Minister's age and things like that. What happened? Has he lost his concern for the value of the rupee since then? What is happening with the value of the rupee is an indication of the rest of the world's confidence in the Indian economy. And if you see, every agency of note, whether it be rating agencies like Moody's, which have lowered their ratings for India, but more than that, multilateral organizations like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, every single one of them has dramatically lowered their estimate for the Indian economy's growth rate. IMF has lowered it from 7% to 6.1%, World Bank from 7.5% to 6%. Now, these two agencies, they are multilateral agencies, are not in the business of collecting their own data. They're in the business of working with government data, and this is basically indicating that they have lost their confidence in government data and they have lost their confidence in this government's ability to manage the economy. But what is this government successful at? It is successful at increasing, as you could see, NPAs in the mudra sector. It is successful at increasing NPAs overall because of its inability to respond to the banking sector crises. It is successful in creating even more problems in the banking sector. It is successful in achieving the highest level of frauds ever in India's economic history, banking frauds. So this is what this government is very, very good at demonstrating new lows for the economy across multiple dimensions. There are many more things that are going to hurt the common person, the common family. The real estate sector, in spite of all their efforts, is continuing to be in deep distress. The number of unsold apartments, the number of unfinished projects continues to grow, and this is going to lead a large number of families in the lurch without the ability to fulfill their aspirations to own a home. Now, further, if you were to look at what this government does in response, first of all, a lot of the mistakes were created by themselves. In the budget, the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced numerous measures that we criticized right there. For example, the measure of bringing in criminal action against companies on their corporate social responsibility spending, the increase in taxes in certain sectors, etc. And we criticized them. Later, when faced with a barrage of criticism from all across, including from captains of industry, the finance minister started making what was the rollbacks. That's the old phrase, right? Rollbacks on these tax measures, and of course, then unable to deal with the drop in the stock market, unable to deal with the constant attacks from industry, they went ahead and provided a corporate tax cut. What is this kind of diagnosis? The problem is dropping consumption in rural India, where 2/3 of the population live, where people are falling into poverty, and what does this government do? It goes out there and provides a tax cut to corporate India. Have any of you benefited from the tax cuts? Has this resulted in lower prices for manufactured goods of any kind in the marketplace? No. All that the tax cuts have done is allowed the companies to take care of their balance sheets a little better. This is the continuing story. Measures from this government that do not reach the people, measures that do not address the problem. There's been a lot of pressure on the Reserve Bank of India to cut rates. Has that resulted in lower rates for housing loans, for other kinds of loans that you might want to take out? Has there been what is called monetary transmission? No. Once again, you find that this government's measures are just actions that get washed away, blown away in the air without any tangible impact. Today, in the question hour, by mistake, Mantri Pradhan, not Pradhan Mantri, but Mantri Pradhan said, the government has no business being in government. He wanted to say this government has no business being in business. But it struck me that this was a confession from the minister that this government has no business being in government because it cannot run the economy. It does not know how to deal with the plight of the most poor and vulnerable people of India. And that is exactly clear, the kinds of measures that are aimed at trying to resolve problems which are not resolving those problems. We are in, and let me predict here for you, a lot more trouble is on the way. We have a situation where none of the 1 lakh crore targets for monthly GST revenues, none of them have been met in 2019. So there's going to be a bigger and bigger hole in the fiscal deficit. Further, the amount of money that has been foregone by the corporate tax cut is also 1.45 lakh crores that adds to this bigger and bigger fiscal deficit. And in spite of taking 1.76 lakh crores from the RBI, from its reserves, they are not going to be able to meet any of those numbers that they projected in the last budget. For that, there have to be two assumptions in that budget that have to be met: a 4% inflation rate and then real growth rate beyond that of 8%, right? So that means what we call a nominal growth rate of 12%. What have we seen instead? That growth rate is 5% and falling. So basically, there is no hope in this earth or in the netherworld or wherever the finance minister gets her advice from, of filling that hole in the fiscal deficit. So what you're going to see is more downgrading, because the government over the last few years has been selling itself as a fiscally responsible government, as a government that will be able to manage the economy in a particular manner. But this has been a charade of the worst sort. Right from the beginning, whatever fiscal deficit targets have been met at the cost of you and me, the common person of India, because instead of passing on the bonanza, the windfall that the government got from lower oil prices, they insisted on keeping excise duties, taxes, and other cesses high to ensure that they were able to match that fiscal deficit target. So what you're going to see is more attempts to sell the family silver, to sell the family gold. We have seen announcements about BPCL, we've seen announcements about Concor, we've seen announcements about Shipping Corporation of India. These are called strategic disinvestments. They are strategic because they are aimed at taking care of the needs of this government's crony capitalist friends. In a few months, once this process is over, I think we can meet again and see who won the bids, who has the capacity to take part in this particular exercise. And if even they refuse to go forth and do something about this, you will see that one part of the government, an LIC or an ONGC, will be brought in to provide the government some cash within what is, after all, one hand giving money to the other. So overall, what we have is a state of the economy that is absolutely, absolutely terrible. Unemployment is a tangible problem. We've been raising this before, but today I want to raise one other aspect that we have not paid enough attention to as a nation: the rising unemployment amongst women. If unemployment is 7% overall, and about women are bearing the burden of Modi Sarkar's economic mismanagement. In urban areas, 24%, 1 in 4 women are unemployed against 6.5% of men. In rural India, nearly 15% of women are unemployed as against 5.9% men. Urban female labor force participation stands at 9.7%, 9.7%, as against 68.8% for men. Okay? So basically, what is happening is the more vulnerable portion of India, the women, are being driven out of the workforce. They are losing that opportunity to add a second income, or in many cases, a first income to their families, and going into deep distress. And when you look at unemployment rate for women, it stands at 71.99%, and for 15 to 19, and 67.38% for ages 20 to 24. So basically, youth, women is a signal, youth overall are being deluded and being misled by this government. There is all kinds of talk, but there are no jobs that will be awaiting the youth of India as things move forward. Just in very, very simple terms, GDP is measured by consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus exports minus imports. Okay, that's the basic formula. Consumption, deep trouble, especially in rural India. Private investment, people are not borrowing and investing, banks are not lending, people from outside are not investing. In very simple terms, investment is in deep trouble. Government expenditure, the government needs to have money first before it can expend. Okay. Exports have been in deep trouble, and there is a larger story there, which is that there are trade wars being fought between the US and China. There are opportunities for India to take advantage of these openings. Instead, we are leaving that space to Bangladesh, to Vietnam, and others. And imports continue to increase. Overall, that larger GDP figure is going to see a downward slide, and we're going to see worse ratings in the years to come. But I'd like to just once more highlight, focus on the human dimension of this. If the economy is faltering, if people have no scope for jobs, and no hope for additional income and wages, if they have to cut their food intake, then this is going to be a crisis which really hurts every common person, especially in rural India. And it is time for the government to wake up, to accept the data that is, putting that stark figure in its face and saying, this is what you need to do. This is where you need to demonstrate policy measures that will take care of those who are most vulnerable, our women, our rural population, and people, especially our youth in urban India. Any questions? Whatever you're referring to, there are two aspects to it. One is an internal issue with the NCP. NCP has been an ally of ours, and whatever is happening about who is spending time away and coming back, etc., that is their internal issue. I do not want to comment on that, neither will the party. The other issue is the larger story about what this government is doing. Every time the government wants to get somebody to join them, what they will do is offer a carrot of waving off the cases against them. This is the Ganga Snan process that the BJP offers to various people. And when you, so this has nothing to do with any specific individual. This has to do with a pattern on the part of the government, and that is what we were criticizing, that this government should not basically take back cases against people just because they are showing some affection towards the BJP. We've seen this in different parts of the country, and people whom the BJP themselves were strongly opposed to, the moment some affection began between them, that is a misuse of the legal process. So we want the law to take its course. We want this government to stick to the due process of law. If you file a case and you are investigating somebody, then this is go right to the let the law take its own course. Do not misuse these agencies for your political gains. I should ask you to ask questions, not necessarily to us. We are revealing the truth, but to the government and its terrible mismanagement of the economy. Yes, sir.
So, regarding the Maharashtra issue, sir, is Sonia Gandhi going to attend the swearings and attend करेंगे और दूसरा सवाल उससे जुड़ा है कि क्या इस पूरे नए फॉर्मेशन से is there going to be a beginning of a new alliance, a new permutation and combination?
The answer to the first question will be known in due course. The second question, what we have seen in the last few years is an attempt by the ruling party to run roughshod over every other political party, including its own historic allies. So what we have seen is a regrouping within the country of various forces in a very, very pragmatic manner, saying this ruling party wants to be the ever-ruling party, and that is not good for the health of the country, the economy, or any, and therefore it's imperative for all parties to come together to halt the BJP's march and to also reverse that and to demonstrate to the people of India that there are other formations that can provide better governance, that have sympathy and empathy for the concerns of rural India, that there are other formations that will actually be free and willing to look at the reality, whether it is reality on unemployment, reality on farmers' distress, reality on women's concerns, and we will be there to respond to them. So that alternative model, a model that does not divide but unites, that gives hope rather than creates anxiety and fear, That is what these pragmatic formations are working to demonstrate. So you will see more of these, and you will see already the map of India changing. Today, you can once more go from Kanyakumari to Kashmir without going through a BJP-ruled state.
There are indications from the government that it might sign FTAs both with the US as well as the EU. Considering that the government's walked out of RCEP and the Congress also opposed it, what would be the Congress position on FTAs with EU and US?
So, the Congress historically has been in favor of freer trade, and we had also initiated the RCEP process. That was at a time when we had got a robust economy under the UPA. We were confident that trade will actually help our people, our businesses, our industry, our agriculture, etc. But in recent times, thanks to Modi Sarkar's mismanagement of the economy, people are in deep distress. Industry, especially those who should benefit from this, micro, small, medium enterprises, have practically collapsed after demonetization and GST. And there are numerous other dimensions that have not been fought over by this government. You want to open up dairy imports at a time when we need to ensure that our one successful cooperative sector, which takes money into the hands of every rural person, not even a landowner, because all you need to do is own a cow. That sort of enterprise, you want to threaten its existence by allowing free imports from dairy products from New Zealand. So this government has not been able to negotiate these agreements in a manner that would balance our interests with that of freer trade. And that is one more international dimension of this government's ineptitude. Now, so what it took a huge chorus of opposition, the launch of protests by various organizations led by the Congress Party across the length and breadth of India for the government to panic and stop from RCEP. Otherwise, Prime Minister went to sign the RCEP deal and sign the death warrant for many sectors of India's economy, especially of those who are most vulnerable. So, similarly, I tweeted at that time saying, RCEP is over, but watch out, there will be more trade agreements. Please check. They will try and very quietly work out something with the EU and the United States. See, the United States doesn't simply sign trade agreements, okay? It will sign trade agreements that are in its national interest. So we also have to make sure that whatever move this government is trying to undertake is in our national interest, and judging from its track record, it does not know what our national economic interest is or how to protect it. Therefore, we will examine these moves in much more detail and, if necessary, launch a similar opposition like we did to RCEP. There is a time and place in an economy for trade agreements. Today, with the economy in deep trouble, with every sector facing disaster, this is not the time for an agreement of this sort. Thank you.
So, just one question, not related to the Rajya Sabha में सरकार ने अहमद पटेल साहब के एक सवाल पे जवाब दिया 12 ग्रुप पे, कहते हुए कि उनके पास inputs हैं, there are inputs that the terror camps in Balapur are regrouping, and the government is alert. How does the Congress Party respond to it?
National security is an issue where the entire country stands behind the government, stands together with the government. And we want terror camps anywhere to be neutralized. So there are many, many methods of ensuring that Pakistan takes back its support to terror groups. Diplomacy is one. Strikes of various sorts are another. We urge the government to take all measures that are necessary to ensure that these terror camps do not regroup, do not strengthen once again, and that we are able to identify terror activities ahead of time, prevent them, and nip them before they can wreak any havoc across the border. Thank you.